HOA Karen K asterisk LLS, a disabled boy. 5 minutes later, his father, a Navy SEAL, shows up. It started with laughter. Kids on bikes, sprinklers hissing across perfect lawns, and the smell of fresh-cut grass floating through the air. Then a scream cut through it all. Sharp, young, final. I was 5 minutes away when it happened. 5 minutes from home, with the windows down, the radio humming low, and the world still intact. My son, Daniel, had been out front practicing how to move faster in his wheelchair. He was 10. Fragile, yes, but determined, a fighter in every way that mattered. Neighbors say Karen had been pacing all morning. Arms folded, lips tight, her HOA badge glinting in the sun like it gave her power over everyone else. She shouted something about rules again, about how the sidewalk wasn't for that thing. That thing was my boy. The shot was so sudden that most people thought it was a car backfiring. Until they saw him fall. Until they saw her standing there, gun shaking in her hand, face pale and cold as porcelain. By the time I turned into the street, sirens were already echoing off the cul-de-sac. People were frozen on their lawns. Some cried, some filmed, and there at the end of the driveway, I saw my son's small body, still silent wrong. I remember the weight of the air, the taste of metal on my tongue, the distant ring in my ears. I remember the world narrowing to one thought, one heartbeat, 5 minutes too late. Before you hear what happened next, tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Before everything fell apart, life was simple, or at least it looked that way from the outside. We'd moved into Brookstone Estates just 6 months earlier, chasing quiet streets and good schools. The kind of place where people waved from driveways, kids rode scooters till dusk, and every lawn looked cloned from a magazine. My boy, Daniel, was the heart of our little world. 10 years old, born with brittle bone disease, but stronger than anyone I'd ever met. His laughter carried across the yard like sunlight. He'd spend hours tinkering with toy cars, imagining they were race machines tearing across deserts. The neighbors smiled at first. Most of them, anyway. Karen lived across the street, short blonde hair, pressed polo shirt, HOA clipboard practically glued to her hand. She had a rule for everything. Trash cans facing the right direction, grass trimmed exactly 2 inches, no non-standard equipment on sidewalks. The first day Daniel rolled his wheelchair down the driveway, she was already watching. I still remember her first words. "You'll need to keep that off the curb." HOA safety guidelines. Her tone made my chest tighten, not from anger, but from knowing exactly what kind of woman she was. The kind who sees difference as disruption. But I brushed it off. I'd faced worse in war zones, seen darker hearts than hers. I thought suburban politeness could hold the peace. If only I'd known that behind those perfect hedges and pastel houses, something poisonous was already taking root, and it was only a matter of time before it bled into my front yard. Tell me, have you ever mistaken peace for safety? It started small, almost invisible, the kind of hostility you could mistake for neighborly concern. Karen began leaving notes, slipped under the doormat, taped to the mailbox, printed on HOA letterhead like a weapon dressed in politeness. Please keep your son's wheelchair off community sidewalks. Safety concern. No non-HOA approved ramps visible from the street. Noise levels must remain within HOA limits. Each message had the same signature, Karen Whitmore, HOA Vice Chair. At first, I laughed it off. Daniel didn't. He asked if he was doing something wrong, if rolling too loudly could actually bother someone. I told him people like Karen were just unhappy inside, that it wasn't his fault. But deep down, it was getting me. Her tone, her stare, that subtle disgust that followed us like a shadow every time we stepped outside. One afternoon, I came home early and caught her standing in our driveway, phone in hand, photographing her mailbox. Documenting violations, she said coldly, without even a hello. When I asked what violation she meant, she pointed to Daniel's basketball hoop, a small, foldable one he used from his wheelchair. "It's clutter," she snapped, and against Section 5, Article 3, personal play structures visible from the road, I could see Daniel watching from a window. His eyes fell when she spoke. I remember feeling the heat rise in my neck. But years of discipline taught me to breathe instead of break. I just said, "He's a kid, Karen. Let him be one." That night, someone slashed the net on his hoop. Clean cut. The kind of act that leaves no witnesses, no proof, just pain. I didn't report it. Maybe I should have. But I told myself, don't give her power. A week later, another notice came. This one was longer, almost personal. It said our yard accessories made the street look unkempt and that residents must maintain uniform appearances. I could almost hear her voice in the ink, dripping with venom disguised as order. Neighbors started whispering. Some avoided eye contact. Others apologized quietly, saying, "You know how Karen gets." But no one stood up. That's the thing about neighborhoods. People love peace until justice costs them comfort. The final straw came during the HOA meeting. She called us out by name, said my son's wheelchair ramp was a safety risk and that exceptions lead to chaos. Her words weren't about rules anymore. They were about control, about punishing what didn't fit her picture-perfect world. When I looked around the room, everyone was silent. I could hear Daniel breathing beside me. Quiet, scared, trying not to make a sound. That was the first night I realized Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was declaring war. If you were me, would you have fought back right then? Or still hoped the neighborhood would do what was right? Karen's complaints turned into a campaign. Every week brought a new notice, a new confrontation, a new rumor whispered behind clipped hedges. The neighborhood that once waved to us now watched us, cautious, distant, afraid to pick a side. It began with the HOA newsletter, a reminder about residents maintaining standards, complete with a photo of a non-approved wheelchair ramp. The image was cropped, but everyone knew whose house it was. Daniel saw it too. He didn't say much, just rolled back into his room and shut the door. That silence hurt more than any words. Then came the parking incident. One Saturday morning, we found a bright orange HOA violation sticker slapped across our van's windshield. Unauthorized vehicle placement. It read, "Our van was parked exactly where it always had been, in our own driveway." But I knew the handwriting. The neat, perfect letters. Karen's. I tried talking to her, calmly, met her in front of her house, where the flag fluttered and her roses bloomed in military precision. "Karen," I said, "we're neighbors. You don't have to do this." She folded her arms, chin lifting slightly. Rules are rules. If you can't follow them, maybe this isn't the right community for you. That line, "maybe this isn't the right community for you," echoed for days. It wasn't about rules. It was about belonging. About her deciding who did and didn't deserve to live here. Soon, small acts followed. Kids stopped coming over to play with Daniel, a few neighbors stopped waving, someone left a dead plant on our porch, the same kind of flower Karen kept by her gate. The tension was no longer private. It spread like smoke. Even at night, I'd see her porch light flicker on when we stepped outside, as if she was keeping watch, waiting for a reason to strike again. One evening, while pushing Daniel around the block, we passed her house. She stood at her window, eyes cold and unblinking. She didn't move, didn't smile, just watched, and for the first time, Daniel whispered, "Dad, I think she hates me." I didn't have the heart to lie. That night, I sat on the edge of his bed and promised him everything would be okay, but deep down, I felt it, that quiet, crawling fear. The kind soldiers know right before something goes wrong. The peace was gone. The countdown had begun. If you were in my shoes, would you have left or stayed to fight for what was yours? The morning it all boiled over, the sun was too bright, that cruel kind of brightness that makes the world look peaceful while everything inside you trembles. Daniel wanted to wheel down the block to watch his friends fly their drones. He'd been excited all week. For once, I let myself believe things had cooled down. We never saw Karen sitting in her car, engine idling at the end of the street. She watched us like a hawk behind her tinted windows. When we came back, Daniel's wheelchair brushed too close to her driveway. Just a soft scrape, The rubber edge of his footrest barely touched her brand new car's bumper. You could hardly see it, just a faint mark. But to Karen, it might as well have been a declaration of war. She stormed out barefoot, face red, voice slicing through the air. "Do you know how much that costs?" She screamed. "Control your child. This neighborhood isn't your playground." Daniel froze. His hands gripped the wheels tight, eyes wide and wet. I stepped between them, hands raised. "It's a scuff, Karen. I'll clean it right now. Just calm down." But she wasn't listening. She leaned closer, pointing a trembling finger at my son. "You people think you can get sympathy because of that chair." The words hit harder than a punch. I felt something inside me crack, the soldier in me wanting to end this right there, the father in me begging not to make things worse. I swallowed my rage and said quietly, "Go inside, Daniel." He obeyed, tears streaking his cheeks. Karen stood there, shaking her head like she'd just proven something. "If you can't control him," she hissed, "I'll make sure the HOA does." That night, she filed a formal complaint, claiming Daniel's wheelchair caused property damage and emotional distress. A letter arrived the next day demanding we pay for repairs or face HOA disciplinary action. I laughed at first. Then I saw Daniel hiding in his room, his drawings of cars and stars crumpled on the floor. "I don't want to go outside anymore," he whispered. "She's always watching." That's when I knew this wasn't about a car, a ramp, or a rule. It was about power, about fear, and I had spent my life fighting bullies in uniforms. I wasn't going to lose to one in a polo shirt. Still, I had no idea how far she'd go. And by the time I found out, it would already be too late. Tell me, when someone threatens your child, do you forgive or prepare for war? The next few days felt uneasy, like living under a storm cloud that refused to move. Karen hadn't filed any more letters, hadn't yelled, hadn't even looked our way. That silence should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like the calm before something terrible. Daniel was doing better, or at least pretending to. He spent afternoons painting in the driveway while I repaired a fence post. Every so often, I'd catch him glancing across the street, checking if she was there. For a while, she wasn't. Then, on Thursday afternoon, her blinds twitched. Just once. Then twice. Watching again. That night, a letter slid under her door. No envelope. Just paper, typed and unsigned. "There will be an HOA safety check this weekend. Keep your son indoors. We'll handle it if you don't." My fists clenched the moment I read it. I knocked on her door the next morning. She opened it halfway, a smile tight as barbed wire. "Lose something?" she asked. "You need to stop," I said. "Whatever you're planning, leave my family out of it." Her eyes flicked to the badge framed on my shirt, Navy SEAL insignia. "Big talk for someone who hides behind a wheelchair," she said and slammed the door. That's when I realized she wasn't just unhinged. She was dangerous. Saturday came bright and windless. I was called in to help a friend move across town, just an hour away. Daniel begged to stay home and paint, said he'd be fine. Against every instinct I had, I said yes. He'd earned that freedom. While I was gone, neighbors later said Karen was outside, pacing her lawn, muttering to herself about disorder and respect. She carried her clipboard at first, then, later, her handgun. The HOA didn't schedule any safety check. That was her idea alone. By the time I got the call, by the time I heard that single word, accident, over the phone, the sky had already turned red with sirens. The trap wasn't a setup I could see. It was patience. Weeks of simmering hate, waiting for a spark. And I had left my boy right in the center of it. I remember the road blurring under my tires, my chest tightening as I sped home. The dispatcher said only one sentence that made sense. "Sir, shots have been fired on your street." That's when everything in me went quiet. Soldier, father, human, all the same thought pounding through my skull. She finally did it. If you knew your child was in danger and your enemy was waiting for the right moment, would you have trusted peace? The world can fall apart in a single heartbeat, and sometimes it waits until you're close enough to hear it break. By the time I turned onto our street, red and blue lights painted every house like a nightmare. Neighbors stood on their lawns, whispering, some crying, some filming. My tires screeched as I stopped in the middle of the road. I ran before the car even fully stopped. My boots hit the pavement hard, every sound muted by the ringing in my ears. I saw the yellow tape, the stretcher, the dark stains spreading across the driveway that should have been filled with chalk drawings and laughter. And I saw her, Karen, standing beside two officers, her hands trembling, eyes wide like she couldn't believe what she'd done. Her gun lay on the grass beside her. "Sir, you need to stay back," an officer yelled, but I pushed through anyway. "That's my boy." I shouted, "That's my son." They didn't stop me. They couldn't. I dropped to my knees beside Daniel. His wheelchair had tipped over, one wheel still spinning slowly. The side of his shirt was dark, his small hands cold. His lips tried to move, but no sound came. I pressed my hands over the wound, whispering his name over and over like the sound itself could pull him back. "Stay with me, buddy. I'm here. I'm here now." One of the EMTs said something about pulse, pressure, oxygen, but the words were just noise. The sirens screamed, louder, closer, as the ambulance doors swung open. I followed them until they pulled me back. "We've got to work, sir. Let us work." Karen was still standing there, still shaking. When our eyes met, she flinched like I'd struck her, but I didn't move. I just stared, breathing through teeth I could feel grinding together. "Why?" I asked her, voice low. "What could a 10-year-old do to you?" She didn't answer. One of the officers spoke instead. "She claims it was self-defense. Says he rolled toward her driveway too fast, startled her." I laughed, a sound that didn't even feel human. "Startled her." I whispered. "He was 10. He couldn't even walk." Neighbors started to come closer then, a few shouting, some crying, some taking photos. The illusion of safety this place once had was gone. I remember one detail that never leaves me. Daniel's painting set still open beside the fallen chair. A half-finished picture of the sunset he'd been painting right before it happened. The brush had rolled into the street. 5 minutes. That's all I'd been gone. 5 minutes that would replay in my head for the rest of my life. The officers led her away. No cuffs. No fight. Just quiet obedience like she already knew the story she'd tell. Accident, fear, self-defense. But the truth was written all over her face. Control gone wrong. Hatred unmasked. When the ambulance pulled away, I stood there staring at the blood seeping into the cracks of the driveway. The place where my son used to race toy cars. The place where our laughter used to live. And I made a promise. Not as a soldier. Not as a neighbor. As a father. She'd taken everything from me, and now I'd make sure the world finally saw what she really was. If you were me, standing over your child, knowing the system might call it an accident, what would justice look like to you? The hospital lights were too white, too calm, the kind of sterile brightness that pretends death isn't sitting in the corner. I sat in the waiting room, hands still stained from my son's blood, staring at the door they'd just closed behind the gurney. Minutes blurred into hours. Nurses moved like ghosts, voices muffled. Every tick of the clock carved deeper into my chest. Finally, a doctor came out, kind eyes, trembling voice, and shook his head. No words, just that quiet gesture that crushes a soul completely. I don't remember standing. I just remember the floor tilting beneath me. The sound that came out of me didn't feel like mine, raw, broken, too deep for language. They let me see him. He looked peaceful, like he was asleep. The same tiny scar on his chin from when he fell off his first toy car. His hands folded neatly over his chest, paint still faintly stained on his fingers. I brushed his hair back and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't there, buddy. I should have been." Outside the hospital, the world kept moving. Cars honked, people laughed, traffic lights blinked like nothing had changed. But mine had stopped. Completely. The police came that night. Questions. Reports. Statements. I answered everything with a voice that didn't sound like mine. "Was your son threatening her? Did you teach him to approach people with caution? Could she have felt endangered in any way?" Endangered. That word burned like acid. My boy, who couldn't even walk without help, endangered her. I asked where she was. They said she was at home. Released pending investigation. Released. That night, I sat in the dark, staring out at the street. The same street where it happened. The same one she still lived on. The sound of her porch light clicking on felt like a taunt. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Some left flowers. Others left notes that said, "We're so sorry." But no one came inside. Grief makes people cowardly. I didn't eat, didn't sleep. The soldier in me wanted to act, but the father in me was still trapped in disbelief. I replayed it over and over, each second stretching into forever. And when the sun rose the next morning, I realized something that changed everything. She was free because she thought I'd stay broken. She didn't know who I used to be. She didn't know what I was trained to do. If someone took your child and walked home that same night, would you wait for justice or would you become it? The official investigation began the next morning, but from the way the officers spoke, I could tell they'd already made up their minds. Tragic misunderstanding, they called it. A neighborhood dispute gone wrong. Their words turned my son's death into paperwork. Detective Collins, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, led the questioning. He sat across from me in the small gray interview room, hands folded, tone calm. Too calm. "Mr. Hayes," he began, we reviewed the scene. "Mrs. Whitmore claims your son startled her, rolled down her driveway, suddenly. She said she feared for her safety." I leaned forward. Feared for her safety? He was in a wheelchair, painting. What threat could he possibly be? He hesitated. There's a neighbor statement saying she yelled at him earlier. Maybe she thought what? That my disabled son was attacking her with a paintbrush? My voice cracked mid-sentence, but I didn't care. Collins sighed. "Look, I don't like it either, but unless we can prove intent, the DA might push for manslaughter at best. No, witnesses saw the first second of the altercation." That word, intent, stuck in my head like a nail. I had seen her intent for months, written in every complaint, every threat, every glare. But now they wanted proof on paper. So I gave it to them. I spent the next 2 days collecting everything, every HOA letter, every text message, every voicemail she'd left. I even got the security camera footage from the house across the street. Karen didn't know I'd helped the neighbor install that camera months ago. The footage showed her pacing, shouting, aiming before the shot. The boy wasn't even moving toward her. He was sitting still, brush in hand. When I brought the USB drive to the police station, Colin's jaw clenched as he watched it. "This changes everything," he said quietly. Still, the system moved slow, like justice was afraid to get out of bed. The press caught the story, though. HOA vice chair shoots disabled child in suburban dispute. The town erupted. Reporters camped outside her house. Protesters gathered by the HOA office. For once, her silence couldn't save her. She tried to call me once. I didn't answer. What could she say that would matter? The night before the trial, I drove back to the spot where it happened. The chalk outline was gone, washed away by rain. Only faint stains remained. I stood there in the dark, hearing Daniel's voice in my head. "Don't let her win, Dad." And I whispered back, "I won't." If the law wanted proof, I'd give them proof. If they wanted a witness, I'd be louder than every lie she'd ever told. Because this time, justice wasn't optional. It was personal. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain, that damp mix of history and heartbreak. I sat in the front row, the seat where victims' families always sit. The same seat where you're close enough to see the person who took everything from you, but too far to do anything about it. Karen walked in wearing a gray blazer and fake humility. No HOA badge this time. Her hair was tied tight, her expression crafted. Remorseful, fragile, innocent. She clutched a tissue she didn't need, and the cameras clicked like distant thunder. The judge's gavel hit once. People versus Karen Whitmore. The prosecution began with facts. The footage, the weapon, the witnesses. Every frame played on a screen larger than life. My son's small figure in his chair, her silhouette, rising, the glint of a gun, then the flash. Gasps filled the courtroom. Karen didn't look up. When it was my turn to testify, I felt my legs tremble. Years of combat, of loss, of chaos. And yet this was the hardest mission of my life. Facing her. Speaking for him. I served my country for 12 years. I began. I've seen war zones quieter than what she created in our neighborhood. My son was 10. He painted sunsets. He smiled at strangers. And she killed him because she couldn't control her hate. Karen's lawyer objected, speculative motive. The judge overruled it. I continued. She said she feared for her safety. I want everyone here to watch that video again and tell me what threat they see. Because I see a child. My child. The silence afterward was thick, heavy, unbreakable. Then Karen took the stand. Her voice quivered, carefully. It was an accident. He startled me. I didn't mean to. The prosecutor leaned forward. Did you threaten him before? She hesitated. I was just trying to enforce community rules. Rules? The prosecutor said sharply. Is there a rule that says you can shoot a disabled boy for touching your driveway? The gallery murmured. Even the judge's face hardened. Then came the moment that sealed it. The footage was paused, zoomed in. There it was, her finger already on the trigger before Daniel even moved. Her aim steady. Her face twisted not in fear, but fury. Karen broke then. Tears, shaking, muttering, I didn't mean to. But it was too late. When the jury returned hours later, the room held its breath. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Karen Whitmore, guilty of second-degree murder. I didn't cheer, didn't cry. I just closed my eyes. The sound of the gavel struck again, and this time it didn't echo, it landed like closure. She turned once before being led away. Her lips trembled, eyes glassy, searching for something, mercy, maybe, but she found none. Outside, the press swarmed. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Hayes, do you feel justice was served? What do you want to say to other parents? I said only one thing. Justice isn't vengeance. It's remembering who the victim really was. That night, I drove home alone. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt haunted. The chair in the corner, the half-finished painting on the easel, they weren't reminders of death anymore. They were proof of life, of light, of love that refused to die. Karen got her sentence. But I got something greater. The truth finally spoken aloud. If you were in that courtroom, staring into the eyes of the person who took your child, would hearing guilty ever really be enough? The morning after the verdict, the sky was overcast, gray and heavy, as if the whole town was exhaling at once. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. No dreams, no flashes, just silence. When I arrived at the courthouse for sentencing, Karen was already seated. No blazer this time, just a beige jumpsuit, her hands cuffed, her eyes red and tired. The arrogance she once wore like armor was gone. What sat before me wasn't the HOA tyrant anymore. It was a hollow woman who'd finally run out of lies. The judge read her sentence slowly. 25 years to life. No parole until she served 20. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's lawyer bowed his head. She didn't speak, but I did. The judge allowed a final statement. I stood, heart steady for the first time since the shooting. I came here today not for revenge. I said, voice low but clear, but for truth. The truth that my son didn't deserve to die on a quiet street in a peaceful neighborhood. The truth that hate can live anywhere, even behind trimmed hedges and picket fences. I looked right at her. You said you were scared of him. But you weren't scared, Karen. You were angry that he existed, that he reminded you kindness doesn't need permission. Her eyes filled, but I didn't stop. I'm not here to forgive you. Not yet. Maybe one day, but not today. The judge nodded for her to speak. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No words came. For the first time since it all began, Karen Whitmore was silent. Afterward, as the deputies led her away, she turned slightly, just enough for our eyes to meet one last time. There was no hatred there anymore, only emptiness. The kind that comes when someone finally understands the damage they've done. Outside the courthouse, the press waited again. Cameras flashed, microphones waved. How do you feel, Mr. Hayes? One reporter shouted. I paused, looked up at the gray sky, and said quietly, like the world can breathe again. Walking to my truck, I passed a group of neighborhood kids, Daniel's age, riding bikes, laughing. For a second, my throat tightened. I imagined him among them. Racing down the sidewalk, calling my name. Justice had been served, on paper at least, but justice doesn't bring back laughter. It just gives it a place to rest. That night, I placed Daniel's painting, the one he'd been working on that day, on the wall of our living room. The colors were soft and unfinished, but beautiful. I stood there for a long time, the quiet wrapping around me like a promise. If you lost everything to hate but had one chance to face it, would you choose revenge or peace? 6 months later, the seasons had shifted. The lawns were green again, the air sweet with summer, and the house didn't echo as sharply when I walked through it. The silence still lingered, but it no longer felt empty, it felt sacred, like Daniel was still here, quietly watching. The HOA office had been dissolved after the scandal. Karen's name was erased from every plaque. Her house sold to a young couple with a baby. They didn't know the history. I didn't tell them. Let the house have a chance to forget, even if I never could. I spent my mornings building something new, a wheelchair-accessible playground on the edge of town. The city council approved it in Daniel's name, the Hayes Hope Park. The first time I saw a kid roll down that ramp laughing, I swear I felt him there, not as a ghost, but as sunlight on my shoulder. People still came up to me in grocery stores, at the gas station, in church, some offering condolences, others saying I was strong. But the truth is I wasn't strong. I just refused to stay broken. On what would have been his 11th birthday, I drove to the lake, where we used to fish. The water was still, silver under the morning light. I set his favorite toy car on the dock, the same one he always said could outrun the wind. I kept my promise, buddy, I whispered. She can't hurt anyone anymore. A breeze rippled the water then, soft, warm, almost like an answer. I used to believe justice ended in the courtroom. Now, I know it begins after. It's in how we choose to live once the pain stops being new. In how we carry the memory of those we've lost, not as anchors, but as compasses. Before I left, I looked up at the sky, a deep, endless blue, and said the words I'd been holding for months. Goodbye, son. You made me better than I ever was. Then I turned, keys in hand, ready to start driving again. Not away from the past, but toward something that finally felt like peace. Because in the end, revenge fades, but love leaves footprints no storm can wash away. If you've ever lost someone and kept going anyway, tell me, what helped you find your way back to light?